Welcome to everyone joining us today. We are excited to talk about this very important topic with you, eating well while living with lung disease. Today's special presentation is being recorded so that it is available to others who are unable to join us today. The American Lung Association is a champion for lung health with a mission to save lives by improving lung health and preventing lung disease. An extremely important part of our mission occurs at Better Breathers Club meetings. These programs have connected people living with lung disease to educate and support in communities around the country for over 50 years. Amazing facilitators and members like those joining us today are integral to continuing the fight to improve lung health and the quality of life for those living with lung disease. Today, our presenter will be discussing some information, tips, and tricks regarding nutrition, diets, and maintaining a healthy weight. Please remember to always consult your healthcare provider with any questions specific to your medical condition or questions that arise from information from this webinar. During this presentation, we will have some polling questions for you to answer. Go ahead and answer your questions in the chat option of the meeting. You should see that option in the top bar of your presentation. Also, if you have questions during the presentation, you can ask them in the Q&A tab. We will try to get to as many questions as we're able to at the end of the presentation. Now I am excited to introduce our guest speaker for today's webinar, Kirsti Mauthe. Kirsti is a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and licensed dietitian who currently serves as a clinical nutrition manager at Presbyterian Homes and Services, and has also worked in local hospitals in the Twin Cities, Minnesota area. Kirsti's passion for the important role that nutrition plays in overall health stems from her mom being diagnosed with spontaneous coronary artery dissection in her early 40s. Kirsti, thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, we're just going to do a mic check. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, I'll get started. Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. As Jen said, I am Kirsti Mauthe. I'm a registered dietitian, licensed as well in the state of Minnesota. I work mainly with older adults, but I do have experience in the past with cardiac rehab and other pediatrics. I am a mom of 2 and 1 on the way, so very excited to be here. Our agenda today, like Jen mentioned, is going to be discussing briefly diet and nutrition for chronic lung disease. Then we'll quickly go over barriers to eating and some tips for overcoming those, and discuss BMI, ideal body weights, and then move on to Q&A. If you have questions, like Jen mentioned, put it in the chat, and then we can answer hopefully at the end. All right, we'll get started. The first, you guys. First, right now we're going to discuss nutrition. So overall, I think we all have different definitions of nutrition. What is nutrition? And you guys have to excuse me really quick. I cannot see my slide.
You want me to share my screen, Kirsti?
Yeah, they're just like this
The
big.
screens are showing on the call. The attendees can see the full screen.
Ah, I got one. Okay, I can see it now. When if somebody else has control, I can see the screen. When I have control, it is like very, very microscopic. But I can just go off memory too, if that works. Otherwise, you can always just click the slides for me too, Jen, if that's easier. Is that okay?
You bet. Just let me know and I'll advance the screen for you.
Wonderful. I'm sorry. Thank you so much, guys.
Oh, no problem.
Okay, so let's talk about nutrition. What is nutrition? Basic definition right there is the food that we take into our body that influences our health. So everyone thinks of nutritious foods as those great foods that help our health, and that is the truth. But everyone has a different perspective of what nutrition is, and that's based off many factors that we'll briefly go over. You know, the personal preference, what foods do you enjoy? Religious differences. You know, some religions exclude certain food groups and others do not. Food allergies, different other diseases or conditions you may have. socioeconomic status. Not everyone has the same access to different types of foods, different types of food groups, and pricing as well. Other things also is, do you eat alone or do you eat with family? Or do you enjoy eating or is it a chore? It's important to remember overall, though, through this presentation that nutrition is never, ever a one-size-fits-all plan. Everyone is different, and what is healthy for you may not be healthy for your neighbor or your friend or even your significant other, and that is okay. So overall, we're going to go through general recommendations, but as Jen mentioned, talking to your provider or registered dietitian about your specific disease and condition is ideal because everyone is different. You can go to the next slide. Wonderful.
Okay, so we already have our first polling question. Remember to put your answers in the chat. When you're looking at these food options, which one are you most likely to choose? So go ahead and start putting answers in the chat. We'll give you a minute to add your responses and then kind of see where everyone is gravitating to. So which of these options interests you? Just give it a minute here. I'm seeing a lot of people saying the Mediterranean diet, Kirsti. And then a few meat and potatoes. And I have a vegetarian. So a lot of the Mediterranean though. So I'd say about 60% are telling us Mediterranean, which that does look really good. So good. You can keep putting your answers in there, but it looks like a lot of Mediterranean. All right.
Awesome. Great. Well, I will tell you one thing. Mediterranean would be the one that I would pick too, just that looks the best to me. But there is no single diet identified as a magic pill for respiratory health. And there's no really magic diet identified overall as well. What we look for is well-rounded diet with plenty of variety. You want to incorporate those fruits and veggies to get those antioxidants and vitamins, fiber, the healthy fats, the lean proteins. I think everyone knows that. Easier said than done, right? But the key thing to remember is that we can make most diets healthy, especially when managing chronic lung disease. So if your preference would be meat and potatoes, we can definitely work with that to make it healthy for you, as well as vegetarian, as well as Mediterranean, and even paleo. If it's, if you work closely with the dietitian, we can make that work to include all food groups as well. There are some specific recommendations for chronic lung disease, and that would be an increase in protein intake to help maintain that lean body mass. We want to maintain your muscles. And so 20% energy intake, maybe even a little higher for protein is recommended. That would be 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilogram. Always, of course, check in with your provider or dietitian regarding those recommendations. Just for reference, most people, especially older adults, we would recommend 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram body weight for protein. But with the chronic lung disease, we really want to maintain your muscle mass. We really want to have those high protein foods. So we do recommend a little higher intake overall. Nutrition supplements, if necessary, are a good option, and we can talk about that later. And we do have increased calorie needs as well, especially if you're in an exacerbation. One study had shown that it's about 10 times more calories when someone with COPD is an exacerbation than with someone without. And that was done doing like basal metabolic calorimetry. So we know exactly how much that is. So you do have to increase calories when in exacerbation or when sick. Try to get those because we want to maintain really your lean body mass. And also eating a diet with less carbohydrates and more fat also might make you breathe even easier. I did say that there was no magic pill in that, or more magic diet, and that is true. But when we metabolize our carbohydrates, we do produce more CO2. So they call a respiratory quotient, and that we look at that, how we metabolize protein, our macronutrients, protein, fats, carbohydrates. And overall, carbohydrates do produce the most carbon dioxide, so may make it more difficult to breathe. Fats produce the least, proteins right in the middle. And then if you do a mixed food, so soup, or you're eating a whole meal that's mixed together, that's right in the middle too of the RQ. So it's just really when it's just a plain simple carbohydrate that you do produce more CO2. But overall, in general, the consensus based off all the studies is they're not going to flat out recommend high fat and low carb because it's not going to fit everybody, especially those that have cardiac disease on the side. Not always great, but they do say the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics does just say that overall excess calories increases that CO2, making it more difficult to breathe. So they say replace those energy needs. So eat what you need to eat, what we should eat to have good weight and great health and lean muscle mass. But eating anything in excess could really make it more difficult to breathe, which we all know too. So here's an example from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics of a lung disease sample menu. This menu provides 2,600 calories, which is quite a bit, 138 grams of protein, again, quite a bit. But it's a good example of just a simple menu to get your protein, your carbs, your veggies, scrambled eggs, tuna salad, cottage cheese. These aren't extremely large meals, but this is a lot of calories. And you can make a smoothie right there with fat-free milk, dry milk. I would personally use whole milk too if you need to get those calories in. And over there for the evening meal, you can kind of see that they did a ground beef patty, making things easier to chew. Gravy, potatoes, butter, broccoli, melted cheese. Again, we're trying to get those calories in. So that's when they're adding the butter and the melted cheese, and even an evening snack. So now we're going to quickly go into managing difficulties. So barriers to eating and how to overcome them.
Great. And we have our second polling question. So for this one, what do you find to be the greatest barrier to eating? You can choose more than one and go ahead and put your answers in the chat, and we'll take a minute to let people respond and then share the results. Again, you can, if it's more than one, go ahead and put more than one answer in. Seeing a lot of poor appetite, lack of energy, desire to prepare food. A lot of lack of energy and desire to prepare food there, and bloating as well. So kind of across the board on that one, Kirsti. A little bit of everything.
Wonderful. Well, we'll go over all of them and some tips. First, I think we're going to discuss bloating. There's quite a few slides on bloating. I might go through them a little fast, but again, I'll do my best to answer questions at the end. Right now, first of all, we'll go over foods that cause bloating, and I have a couple tips underneath there too, and I know that you all have access to the slides, so you can have them at home for how to improve those. But foods that may cause bloating or make it worse would be our carbonated beverages, beans, lentils are examples, cruciferous vegetables, that's like your broccoli, your Brussels sprouts, and your cabbage. And there's little tips too to how to, you can still eat those things, right? Because they're very healthy for you. Beans are healthy, lentils are healthy, those veggies are so great. So tips for that would be, try soaking the beans, and that would help reduce some of those FODMAPs. Those FODMAPs, that's a really fancy term for a fiber that is undigested in the body until bacteria can ferment it. So it's nothing bad. It's actually really good for you, but it does cause bloating, and especially people that have maybe a little irritable bowel syndrome on the side, it can really, really impact their health and just quality of life. So if you soak those beans or get them really rinsed, or canned beans and rinse them really good, that could help decrease the bloating and still eating those high protein foods. Also, portion size is key for a lot of this. And like veggies, kind of the same thing as the beans. That's higher in those fibers that cause that gas and bloating when they're raw. So cooking vegetables and eating a smaller portion would definitely help decrease that. Or if you're just miserable and you don't like them, there's plenty of other vegetables out there that you could get those same vitamins and minerals from. Spinach, cucumbers, carrots, and peppers are usually a little bit better tolerated than the cabbages and cauliflowers and Brussels. And as well, sparkling waters are very, very in right now, and carbonation we know causes bloating. That's pretty common. Recommendation there would be either crack your carbonated beverage, let it sit for a while to have a little bit of the bubbles come out. Just drink one a day. And then also, actually the waters are a little bit better for you in regards to bloating than like a soda because of the artificial sweeteners in sodas, and the sweeteners also can cause bloating, which we'll see on the next slide as well. So dairy, very common to cause bloating. Lactose intolerance is huge in the United States. Multiple studies that I've read and have resources that I looked at were like 68% was pretty much the average of our population that has some form of a lactose intolerance. So those foods, watch out for bloating. But usually butter, the hard cheeses, the yogurt, they contain less lactose and so easier to tolerate. Ice cream, I feel people can't drink milk, but then they can eat a bowl of ice cream, no problem. And that's just because it has less lactose, so easier to digest. There's also so many amazing alternatives out there now that taste great. So you got the almonds, the coconut, the oats, and the soy milks or products that do not contain that lactose and would help with the bloating too. And I already mentioned artificial sweeteners, that those cause bloating and gas, pretty terrible. If you've ever had like a full bag of artificial sweetener, I don't know, gummy worms or something like that, some people have like terrible diarrhea from those. So my recommendation would be to do stevia if you need the artificial sweetener, maybe because you have diabetes on the side. Otherwise, just use regular sugar in the smaller portions. I'm a huge fan of honey, pure maple syrup when I'm baking or cooking for my kiddos as well. So that's an option. And then last but not least, another food that we know causes gas would just be those high fiber foods, the whole grains. Again, foods are very healthy for you, and it's all on a symptom basis, right? So if you eat a ton of bread and you realize you are so bloated you cannot breathe, again, also kind of higher in carbs, which I know that there's a question on that, so I'll answer that at the end about digestion of carbs. But just do it symptom based. Maybe only have half a slice of bread then, because you know that your body just isn't tolerating that very well. Or you could even honestly do a lower fiber bread to get the calories in too, because I see that there was a lot of poor appetite, so that's important. And then there's other ways too to reduce bloating. So if you don't want to change what you're eating, but you're still bloated, there's other tips and tricks. You could eat slower, chew more. Chewing more, smaller bites of food, easier to digest, as well as less air. You're taking in less air, causing less bloating. Drinking more fluids will 100% help things moving faster in your GI tract. And I honestly think water is just the cure for everything. It just makes you feel so much better overall. I will say right now too, and we'll touch it on the appetite slides, but drinking fluids with your meal will actually fill you up and make you more full, and even before your meal. So if you're struggling with poor appetite and just not getting enough calories in, I would recommend definitely staying hydrated, but drinking it after your meal, so that we can make sure you're getting some good calories in first. And then also not using a straw. You gulp more air as well, so that can cause gas and bloating. And you'll see it once, twice, 3 times in my presentation, but definitely eating 4 to 5 to 6 small meals, snacks a day is wonderful for all of the above, for reducing bloating, poor appetite, for shortness of breath. Not so much when it comes to like the fatigue that you're having and the barriers with food, but we can discuss how we can get in those 3 to 5 small meals a day too. Oh, and be mindful of dietary changes as always. Like you say, if you all of a sudden have gas one day, think about what you ate the day before or the meal before. Support those regular bowel habits, and try a probiotic if you need to help with gut health, or eat something with a probiotic. If you don't have any intolerances to dairy, Greek yogurt's awesome. High protein, great probiotic, awesome source of calories, as well as kefir, easy to drink, wonderful probiotic. Kombucha, the tea. So lots of options to get those good probiotics, which are so great for our gut health too. All right, quickly we'll go over shortness of breath as well. This is all from the American Lung Association, and super, super helpful and great for just what to do prior or during a meal to help with that shortness of breath. Clearing your airways at least an hour before you eat will help, and rest before eating. So you're not gonna, want to run errands or clean the house and then sit down to have a meal, especially if you're too fatigued and short of breath to eat. So just sitting down for a little bit. You can even read a book prior or whatever you may do, watch a TV show, do something, scroll on your phone, get your, catch your breath, sit down, and then have your meal. Eating slowly, taking small bites of food, same thing. Choosing foods that are easier to chew, takes less energy, and then also as well leaves you less short of breath. And sitting upright, getting that decrease in that pressure on your lungs, having your diaphragm be able to open, as well as taking breaks between bites, putting your utensil down if you're tired, and doing your deep breathing exercises can help reduce that short of breath while you're trying to eat your meal. Eat more food early in the morning. Usually people are too tired at night and more short of breath later in the day. And so if you know that morning's your best time, that's when you're going to want to get your calories in. Try your hardest to eat as much as you can during that best meal of the day for you, which is different for everyone. Same thing with the 4 to 6 small meals. You'll see it again. Limit liquids with your meals. Drink liquids after meals, which we already kind of discussed. And then consider adding a nutrition supplement at nighttime. Mainly because you want to avoid feeling full. It's difficult to get everything in, right? You're eating those 4 to 6 small meals, you're drinking after your meals. And there has been really, really great research done by Abbott Health Institute on protein intake at night. It's just like for your fasting overnight, it's really going to help maintain that lean body mass and you absorb it well. And sometimes, so a good protein drink in the evening might be a great snack and help you feel a little less full and get all your nutrients in. All right, so here's some tips for making foods easier to chew. You don't have to have all pureed foods, right? There's lots of other options just to make it easier. You can soak dry foods like bread, crackers, cold cereal, and milk. Much softer, much easier to chew, takes a lot less effort. Puddings, ice cream, great sources of calories and protein. Pastas are overall easier to chew than like a sandwich. Might be a little bit harder to chew and to just catch your breath with. Where like a macaroni and cheese or spaghetti usually go down quite a bit easier. Cooking your veggies, or you can use canned or mashed. And I get this question a lot, what's the best vegetables for us? Is frozen, canned, fresh? And I will just say that a vegetable, and if you're eating vegetables and fruit, that is number one. That is the most important thing. They are so great for our bodies and we do not get enough. And they're fresh and frozen are both wonderful. Those would be like the top of the nutrient chain, but you can also eat a canned vegetable and you're still getting some benefit, which is wonderful, and mashed or pureed. So fruit and veggies, all 4, no matter which form, and there is nothing different between a frozen and a fresh in regards to nutrition. Maybe a little bit of fiber when you cook the frozen, but the nutrients are all there. And yeah, they're perfect. These are some proteins that are easier to chew, especially also when you guys are tired and you don't want to make food. I don't know about you, but when I don't want to make, or I have no desire to make, meat seems the most labor intensive, right? You have to constantly wash everything because you don't want to have foodborne illness. And then you have to cook it thoroughly, and then you're cutting it and chewing it. So these are some protein options that might be a little bit easier to chew and to just prepare in general. Cottage cheese is great. If you can tolerate dairy, high protein, right there, small half cup, and it's a wonderful source. Other soft cheeses, and like I've already mentioned, Greek yogurt, a wonderful protein source and easy to prepare. You could always make a big batch in the beginning of the week or in a crock pot. Throw it in the crock pot, shred it up, and then you can have it all week long, and that might help too with that not wanting or that desire to not eat or prepare your food, and it keeps it moist, and it actually has great nutritional value. Adding gravy or sauces will help you to chew easier, or the beans too. Beans and eggs, honestly, eggs are a great protein source. wonderful. They're cheap, they're inexpensive, easy to chew, easier to prepare than I would say, you know, a chicken breast or a steak. Baked fish, also options for just a little bit decrease in labor intense food preparation. And next we say what to do when you have no appetite. Some of these things we've already talked about, so I might not read over everything in the slide, but I know that a lot of you had issues with appetite, just having no desire to eat, which is extremely challenging. We've already talked about the liquids, right? Liquids after your meals, don't drink it before, and don't drink it with, if you can. Nutrition supplements and shakes with a snack between meals instead of at meals is great. We already talked about benefits of a nighttime supplement if you can do it. And then on the next slide, I'll talk about how to add calories to your food so that you don't have to eat as much. You can just eat less, but yet still get the same caloric intake, which is huge, especially when you have absolutely no appetite. Keeping your favorite foods and snacks available and setting up schedules, honestly, on your phone as a reminder or on any alarm clock or anywhere. Breakfast at 8, snack at 11, lunch at 1, whatever works best for your lifestyle, but just setting a reminder to remind yourself to even grab a tiny little snack would be helpful for the poor appetite. And then, like I said, eating the largest meal when your appetite's the strongest. That's different for everyone. Usually appetite is the strongest in the morning if you eat consistently. Now, if you're not a breakfast eater, that is completely the opposite. But I would encourage you to try to eat breakfast because it's so important. And then having your biggest meal. All right. So here's some tips on how to get calories in your body. Now we've talked a lot about liquids, right? And don't drink your liquids with your meal or at your meal. I will say, though, if you're going to drink liquids, pick the ones with calories, especially if you're having problems with weight. We know malnutrition is such an issue with chronic lung disease and just poor weight. So then you want to get those beverages with calories. And you definitely want water, but try to go for the milks, the juices, you know, Carnation instant breakfast, the oral supplements. We can go over a couple different varieties of oral supplements that people that I know generally tolerate well or enjoy. When you're preparing your food, add extra cream, cheese, butter, olive oil, salad dressing. Calories are very, very important. And fat is extremely important, you guys. Fat is twice as many calories per gram as a carb or a protein. So 9 calories in a gram of fat compared to 4 in a gram of protein or a gram of carbohydrate. So you can get so much more bang for your buck when you have a poor appetite by eating some really good healthy fats for you. And it also is good for you know, your breathing, right, as well. It doesn't have as much CO2 production. So those healthy fats, nut butters, nuts, avocados, olive oil, canola oil, all of that good stuff, cooking in with more butter and oil just to get those calories up. And it's easier to eat too, because it doesn't really feel like you're eating another food item. It's just adding calories to the item you're already going to consume. Same things with gravies, sauces, salad dressings. You can add sugar to beverages to get more food if that's your preference, or to more calories, excuse me. Use the full fat dairy. I would recommend doing that. Full fat, whole milk, yogurt, cheeses, especially when you want to get more calories in. Now, if calories are not your problem, then low fat is great. But if you want to eat less and have the same amount of calories, you're going to want to go full fat for everything. And just kind of a little thing with, yeah, perfect, great. Small snacks and meal ideas. Here's just some simple ideas, again, from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. But it shows that you don't have to have this elaborate snack plan to get a good nutritious snack, right? You can have a graham cracker with some great peanut butter on it and a cup of milk, and that is wonderful. You got your protein, your carb. Another one of my favorites is trail mix. Ooh, we probably should go. I'm looking at the time now. We got to go faster. Trail mix is wonderful.
You're doing just fine.
I know. I was looking at the time like, I'm sorry, you guys.
You're doing great. No problem.
Yeah. Trail mix is like the best snack when it comes to calories and healthy fats. You have your nuts, you have your dried fruits. You can add some dark chocolate chips to it to make it taste better. It's sweet. A handful is just a couple hundred calories and it's great. And this is a high protein, high calorie menu. And this is for vegetarians. So I think there's a couple that said that they're vegetarians. I just wanted to show that you can get there, right? A really high calorie, like 3,000 calorie menu, which is extremely high, 110 grams of protein. So I can let you guys read that on your own time too, but I just wanted to show that any diet, right? Any diet, whatever your preference is, can be healthy and it will work for your chronic lung disease. And this diet, we're using oatmeal and fortified soy milk. We're using beans for protein sources, hummus, pita breads, and a smoothie with peanut butter, nut butters. Lots of good things, lots of high calorie foods. All right, guys. Maybe I don't need to go as fast. Great. Now we're going to talk about healthy weight. What's a healthy weight? That is the question.
All right. So next up is our final polling question. And for this one, if you want to just share with us, how frequently do you weigh yourself? There's no wrong or right answer, but it helps us just to know, how frequently do you weigh yourself? If you want to throw those in the chat, that would be great. I'll just we're getting across the board, Kirsti, A's, B's, D's, so daily, weekly, monthly, and only at the doctor's office.
Love it. I will be
a lot of weeklies. I'm getting a lot of weeklies. Yep.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it probably also depends on if you have any other medical conditions, right? Or if your weight is a concern to you as well. You know, if your weight isn't a concern to you, then I would say monthly is okay. But if you are having some issues with not taking in enough calories, I think weekly is a great idea. Or if you have any other diseases where you're maybe retaining fluid, then you want to kind of do the daily weights too to check on that. But generally, when you're talking about weighing yourself, you'll see those big fluctuations in like a week or 2 weeks or a month. And only at the doctor's office, that's a-okay too. As long as there's no concerns overall, I think that's perfectly healthy to just weigh yourself at the doctor's office when you go in. I'm sure most of you know, but there's pros and cons of both and challenges with both, of being overweight or having excess weight on our body, as well as being underweight. I think we hear a lot in our culture about overweight and what that does to our body, and not as much about the malnutrition, but I'll go over both here. Excess weight can increase your shortness of breath. It can put strain on your heart. It can also lead to serious health problems like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, asthma, sleep apnea. So we know that, you know, excess weight isn't great for our bodies. We also know, however, that having chronic lung disease and having that increased basal metabolic rate and those increased calorie needs and those poor appetites, that there is a ton of malnourishment, and it also being underweight decreases your energy level, reduces your exercise tolerance, and exercise is so important for maintaining your muscle mass. Can cause respiratory and muscle weakness, loss of strength, independence, increased risk for falls. Low BMI and malnutrition are also associated with being immune compromised. And lots of recent studies from, I did a couple recent education CEUs as well from the Abbott Nutrition, and they just focus on how much increased risk it is to have malnutrition and low BMI when you're in the hospital. For older adults in general, and especially those with chronic lung disease, it's a bell curve, but a big increased risk for mortality and just poor outcomes and longer hospitalizations with those low BMIs. And some of the facts that they provided were that 1 in 10 adults over 65 are malnourished. So that's just the overall population. When you're looking, and they did COPD specific, and I know not everyone has COPD, but overall, 35% of inpatients with COPD were malnourished and 21% of outpatients. And that's probably really, really small and not accurate because they're not always screened for malnutrition when you're in an outpatient setting. So what is the ideal weight? I just gave 3 different boxes here for 3 different looks at BMIs. You know, we calculate BMI using your height and your weight. It doesn't take account your muscle mass. So there's always, everything's taken with a grain of salt when it comes to BMI. But it's also what providers use and doctors use, and it's a good general standard when you're looking at things. So for just adults in general, we want a BMI, you're underweight if you're under 18.5. Normal is 18.5 to 25. Overweight 25 to 30, and obese is 30 plus. Now there is tons of recent studies out that BMI ranges should change for older adults, so 65 and up. Really because of that mortality risk and because of decreased outcomes, the increased falls, the increased weakness, the loss of muscle mass when we have those lower BMIs. So now they're looking at for older adults, you're underweight if you're under a BMI of 23. Normal would be 23 to 30. So in that overweight category for the adults, and overweight is 30 and plus. And I don't think they even put obesity on there, but obesity would be 40 plus for older adults. Now for specifics for chronic lung disease, sorry, I mean, you guys can see it too, and you can keep it on that slide. The specific would just be going between that 23 and 30 would be great. 27 was the ideal in these recent studies. And now you don't have to shoot for 27, but I love to point it out because I think that everyone was so concerned about being obese per BMI. And I hate using those terms. It's how you feel and what your quality of life is, right? And to show that, hey, like we don't have to be under that 25 mark anymore. We're still healthy up to the 30 is a good indicator of health and nutrition and quality of life. So if you need help doing that, and if we have time in the chat, I can get back to you too. You can ask your provider or meet with a dietitian, and there's also online calculators too that can help you do that. So in the end, good nutrition is important for overall health and quality of life. There are many barriers I know that you are all facing when it comes to eating with chronic lung disease, but just know that nutrition is not a one-size-fits-all plan. You can work closely with a registered dietitian or provider or anybody to help, your specialist to help make healthy meal plans customized for your lifestyle and for your preferences and for your challenges. So there's lots of options. And Jen made 2 awesome resources.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Kirsti. So I just want to thank you so much for all of that great information. And I know it was a lot of information, but we do have these 2 resources that'll be available that have a lot of the tips that you have mentioned in today's presentation. So thank you so much.